Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, everyone listening and everyone watching. Welcome to A Pragmatic Life. My name is Raphael and I'm your host for this podcast. And on this podcast, we discuss productivity and personal development, and we look at life and happiness through a pragmatic and rational lens. If you're someone who wants to be better, if you're someone who wants to do better, whether it's in work or school or business or even relationships, then this is the podcast for you. Because in every episode, there is going to be something that you can take away and apply to your life. And we're going to do it in a very casual way, and we are going to do it in a very fun way. Now, this is the inaugural episode, and I am incredibly excited. I am incredibly nervous. I have never done anything by way of film or TV or recording myself on camera and recording this podcast. Especially as this podcast is not only an audio podcast, but it's a video podcast as well, where you can watch my YouTube channel at Raphael Parvin. But you know, this podcast idea was conceived such a long time ago. But like most things in life, we never action our true goals, do we? We think about it, we let it marinate, but we never create. Why is that? I think this is perhaps the perfect question to start off on this podcast series about pragmatism and productivity and personal development. It's asking ourselves, why don't we action our goals? And in a pragmatic in a pragmatic way, rather, how can we find solutions to this problem? So that's really what we're going to be looking at today. That's really what we're going to be talking about today. But I thought perhaps I should introduce myself. So I have myself my bio here for you to know me, to know who is speaking behind the microphone in front of the camera. Well, I'm from Australia, as you can probably tell from my accent. I'm a former international corporate tax advisor. I worked for a very large multinational consulting firm, and I provided corporate and transfer pricing advice for large-scale multinational corporations and large Australian companies. Now, that is certainly quite a mouthful. The easiest way to really describe my job, and I really hope you don't hate me for it, but I was the person that, let's say, Apple or Amazon or Google would go to when they wanted to legally reduce their tax. And I'm sure you've heard about this in the news, and I am being a little facetious. I certainly am, but you know, that was broadly my role. After that, I decided to go to law school, partially to increase my reach as a corporate advisor to provide legal advice, but also because I had such a fascination with law, especially because of how law impacts each and every one of us. And I truly mean each and every one of us. Every single day, every aspect of our life has something to do with law. And I was very curious to know how that impacted us, certainly with respect to our liberties and our rights. So I wanted to do that, but before doing that and before embarking on law school, I wanted to have a gap year of sorts. And I did that. I traveled, I volunteered, I did a whole bunch of things, living life young and free. But in that gap year, I started my own e-commerce company. And this was just a small little initiative, a small little thing which ended up doing very, very well financially. And this was really my first taste of business. And this is really where pragmatism comes in. And I hope this doesn't sound egotistical or pretentious, but I went to a top-tier business school. I studied finance and accounting. I worked for a large top-tier firm. And yet, running your own business, running your own company, your own little thing, it's so different from what is taught in business school, or what you experience working for a large firm. It requires a completely different mindset, and you know, what you learn in a classroom doesn't necessarily translate to what you experience in real life. And I saw this firsthand. But anyway, and that was really that first start of looking at life through a more rational and reasonable way, not going into these ends of the spectrum, but looking at life in a more rational way, looking at life a little bit more in a practical way with purpose. But anyway, this business ended up doing very well, and since then I've continued investing and and looking at personal investing and certainly teaching financial literacy. I think that's something that is not really necessarily taught in schools that well. In fact, my YouTube channel is primarily dedicated to personal finance and productivity. So if you are interested in that, check that out. And of course, this podcast is going to be available on my channel. So I was able to do all that, but I was also able to realize that one goal of mine that I had all those years ago, and that was to actually go to law school. And now I'm in my final year of my Juris Doctor degree, and I've developed a very interesting outlook in life. So that's really about me, or at least my CV, my work CV, if you will. Certainly if you have any questions about me personally, feel free to send them through. But now that we've established who I am, and now that you've gotten to know me a little bit well, hopefully that allows us to have a little bit more of a connection. But it also allows us to segue to the point of this podcast, or the point of this episode, which is to ask, what stops us from actioning our dreams? What is it that stops us from doing what we have a passion for? And how can we start actioning them? What I want to do is really make this podcast, so this idea of you listening to my voice or you seeing me in front of your screen, let's do this in a practical way where there's actual benefit for you. So what I want you to do in a second is I want you to pause this podcast and I want you to think of a goal that you had or have, or something that you are inspired to do. Anything and everything. So pause it right now. So now you have something in the back of your mind, and let's explore why you haven't taken steps to action this goal. Why haven't you done what you wanted to do, which would bring you so much happiness and so much joy? And through my own personal experiences, I've really come across 7 things that have certainly stopped me from pursuing my goals. Certainly 7 things which, in hindsight, I'm really embarrassed to even think about in many ways, because they seem so small right now. And then hindsight is always 20/20, isn't it? But at that time, it seemed like such a massive hurdle. So I thought, why don't we explore these 7 things? Let's see if it applies to you. And if so, I have certain things that have worked for me. The first reason is that we tell ourselves that we're going to do it tomorrow. I mean, how many times have you told yourself that I'm going to put off this task for tomorrow? It can be anything or anything. I mean, like changing a light bulb. I mean, it's so simple, right? I mean, how many lawyers does it take to change a light bulb? We're not going to go with lawyer jokes today. But it's so simple, right? I mean, that's the whole point of that joke. It's because it's such a simple concept. Why does it take so many people to do it? Why does it take so much time to do it? Why do we keep putting it off and off and off? Why do we say we're going to do it tomorrow? Because clearly tomorrow never comes, does it? Because we say we're going to do it tomorrow on a Tuesday. Tuesday comes along. Tuesday goes. We say we're going to do it on Wednesday. Wednesday comes. Wednesday goes. And it keeps going on and on and on. So, why do we have that? Because the interesting thing is we're adamant that we want to do it. I mean, that's the reason why we take the initiative of putting it off, because we honestly do want to pursue that, whatever it is. I mean, changing a light bulb. I don't know why I came up with that analogy, but we obviously want to have some light, right? We don't want to go to the bathroom in the dark. We want to change the light bulb, but we just can't be bothered. Why is that? I think a big part of it is it ties with procrastination. And really, procrastination is a topic that I want to discuss on a full episode just on procrastination, because it's a very interesting concept. And I have a very interesting idea of procrastination, and certainly the idea of motivation. FYI, motivation is a myth. Stay tuned if you want to know the reason why. But look, we always say we're going to put it off tomorrow. I think, first off, we need to stop using the word someday. We need to stop saying that. We're going to do it someday. Set a date. I mean, I know that we just said that we're going to do it tomorrow. We're going to do it on Wednesday. We're going to do it on Friday. But you know what? The first step is to actually set a date. Don't use the word someday. Set an actual date and then go further. Set an actual time. Often what we find is that when we think we have free time, we don't stay on time. Like we say we're going to do it tomorrow. Okay, tomorrow, but what time? Because tomorrow I might want to go out. Maybe I want to have a drink by the sea. Maybe I want to catch up with some friends. Maybe I want to do, some work here and there, but I don't want to do the exact thing that I want to do. I mean, this podcast, for example, I can say that I'm going to do it tomorrow, but, well, tomorrow never comes, as we established. So set an actual date, set an actual time, make a plan, write it down, physically write it down. Don't even just think about it, actually write it down on a piece of paper. It's crazy. And I don't understand the psychology behind it. Maybe there's a psychologist right now listening and they can explain why, but clearly physically writing things down make a huge difference when it comes to planning and timetabling and writing these to-do lists. So do that. Make a practical effort, make a concerted effort of putting it down on paper that you are going to do this task. Now, that is easier said than done, because the next reason is that we say that we're not ready. And this is quite an interesting concept, saying we're not ready. We're not ready to do this. You've definitely heard of the word pragmatism. You've definitely heard of the word procrastination. Actually, not procrastination. You've definitely heard of the word perfectionism. Goodness me. Perfectionism is it's a bane of my existence. I've always been the type of person who I want to do it right. I want to do it exactly right. In fact, just then was an example of how I am too much a perfectionist, because I would have actually, when I made that mistake right then that you heard, I would have actually cancelled this recording and I would have started all over again. So I would have said everything that I just said. And what benefit is that? Like in a large scale of things, for me, it's a huge, huge thing. I don't like making these small mistakes, but what benefit is that to the bigger scale of things, bigger scheme of things? Like, these small mistakes are natural. And one thing that I wanted out of this podcast was pure honesty between me and you. Real and raw, and, well, that's life. And I think perfectionism is something that I had to deal with on so many occasions. And you might have to deal with perfectionism as well, where you don't take that step forward because you want to make sure everything is right. But guess what? Sometimes we don't have control of that. Many times we don't have control of that. And it's quite cathartic when you don't have control of it, because it's almost like a sigh of relief, because it's not on you. And in your mind, you've done everything that you can. But I think perfectionism is a good thing, but it's also a bad thing, because, as we'll discuss, quantity is also very important. It's not just quality. It's not just doing one thing. A big part of it, of overcoming that, I think, is definitely having confidence in ourselves. It's when we're not confident that we don't do things because it's not perfect. It doesn't look exactly the way we hope it would be. And for me, a big part of developing that level of confidence is talking with other people. And I think that's when you realize that sometimes perfectionism does go overboard. It goes over and beyond what is normal and reasonable, because for other people, they might not even pick up on that mistake that you made or that error that you made. Or they might have, but guess what? It's not a big deal. In fact, it makes people real. When I see people make errors, when I see people stumble over their words or mispronounce something, it almost makes me feel like, wow, they are just like me. They are someone that I can actually get along with. They're not this fake thing. And certainly in this era of social media where everything is fake and everything is so inconsistent, I don't even know what's real and what's not. So having this familiarity, having someone who's real and someone who's able to make mistakes, it's very comforting. So be honest with yourself. Be honest with who you are. Accept your flaws, and especially flaws that you can't necessarily change. Always try to be better. And of course, as I said at the beginning, this podcast is about being the best version of you. It's not being the best version of someone else. All right, there's so many things that I would never ever be able to do, but so what? I would rather be the best me, and that's the ultimate goal for anyone, really. So be honest with yourself and just take that step forward. Just do it. You know, there's a lot of flaws about Nike, but you know, it's an apt saying, isn't it? Just do it. Take that step forward and make mistakes. I don't know about you, and maybe it's sort of showing my age, but do you remember Magic School Bus? Like, it was a children's show that I absolutely loved, and Miss Frizzle would always say that, say this saying, make mistakes and get messy. And of course, let's not be irrational. Let's not go to the other side of the spectrum where, you'll receive a Darwin Award. But in many aspects, making mistakes, getting messy, it's how you learn. It's how you grow. It's how you become better. If you're a perfectionist, well, guess what? That's how you can become a perfectionist, ironically. Make mistakes and take that step forward. And just because you say you're not ready, guess what? You might be ready. You actually might. And it just takes that one step of turning that camera on, turning this microphone on, just talking, just trying, seeing how things go. There are many things that do and should stop us from actioning our dreams, but this is one of those things where it's up to you. It's up to you to take that step forward. The third reason someone might say that they don't want to action their dreams, or they can't action their dreams, is it's hard. It's too difficult. It's too complicated. I can't do it. It's just not something I can do at all. But you know what? Anything in life that's worth it is difficult. I mean, what is something that is really, really worth it to you that is not difficult to achieve? Like, maybe there is one. I can't really think of anything right now that's easy. Or heck, maybe it is easy for you. But guess what? If you think back, maybe it's easy because you put in all this effort from the get-go. Maybe that's a reason why. And as I said before, mistakes happen. But guess what? Mistakes aren't failures. Mistakes are the things that allow you to recognize how you can become better. Like, I never have any regrets in life. I don't regret any mistake that I've made in life because I learned from those mistakes. I would never have become the person I am if I did not have those mistakes. And it's almost like Inception when you think about it, but it's almost like if you didn't make those mistakes, you didn't change. It's almost like a snowball situation where you will eventually come across a situation where that mistake, or the lack of you making that mistake and the lack of you not recognizing that, it could be incredibly fatal. Who knows? I mean, I obviously study law. I've done a lot of criminal law as well. So I can think of a magnitude of things, but even taking it away from the law and just looking at normal everyday life, mistakes are good, right? As long as you learn from your mistakes. And you will definitely make mistakes in whatever goal that you're trying to achieve. It's always going to be hard. It's always going to be difficult. But mistakes are definitely not failures. But look, if something is hard, how can you mitigate against it? I think first off, and we talked about this with the first thing, writing things down, making a plan. It's when we think about things, when we're drawing over these things in our mind, it's often too much. Like, if I'm studying for a test, for example, and I'm considering a piece of legislation, and I think about it and I think about it, and it's just so complex. It doesn't make any sense at all. It's incredibly convoluted. When I write it down, all of a sudden things make sense. When I even transcribe what is on my mind and put it on paper, all of a sudden it's not as bad as what I thought it would be or think it would be. So make a plan. Make a backup plan. That's the other thing. You might not get it right the first time. Have a plan A, but have a plan B, have a plan C. It's not a bad thing to have a plan B or a plan C. I know often, speaking of Magic School Bus, I remember this random quote. It was it Wanda? I don't know. She said, if it was a good plan B, it would be a plan A, which in many respects makes sense. But again, you got to understand the context. Sometimes plan A just won't work, but maybe plan B will. Maybe plan B won't work, but maybe plan C will. So if you have a goal, don't be afraid to have a backup. Don't be afraid to have a safety net. It's not a bad thing. Some people think that if you have a safety net, you're not going to give it your all. Well, I think you should change your mindset. Like if the lack of a safety net is what stops you, then, well, maybe you should change your mindset. And if you want to be practical, if you want to be reasonable and pragmatic, then use everything that you have to your advantage. Speaking of safety net, it kind of reminds me of Batman with Bane trying to leave that prison where he's climbing to get out of it. And that kind of goes against my point because, well, not Bane, but it was Batman himself, Bruce Wayne, getting out of that prison. And it kind of goes against my point because if I recall in that movie, he took that rope off and he decided to climb up without any safety net or safety structure or safety rope at all. And he was finally able to succeed. But I think that was also mindset as well. But that's also fictitious, right? Let's be rational. Let's be reasonable. Having a backup plan is great. And I think certainly when things are difficult, having these mitigating aspects in your life to circumvent any potential failures or to I'm sorry about that. My phone rang. Definitely not good podcast etiquette. But be rational in that. I think it's always a good idea to have a safety net. And, I also think that you should be honest with yourself. That's the sad part. And, this is the pessimistic side of being a pragmatist, is that sometimes things are a bit too hard. As I said before, I could never be a quantum physicist, right? I just don't have any skills or any confidence in high-end mathematics and physics. I might be, semi-good at what I do now, but that is something that I would never, ever, ever, ever be able to do. But that's fine. It's the same thing with the idea of confidence. It's a confident person is a person who recognizes his strengths, is a person who recognizes their failures. That's what makes someone confident. And I think you certainly should be honest with yourself and realize that sometimes things are a bit too difficult. Don't be too overconfident, but have confidence. There's another quote that I actually wrote down. It's from The Office. You might, if there's any fans of The Office out there, Vikram said this: "Confidence, it's the food of the wise man, but the liquor of the fool." That is so true. That is so true. And I don't want this to be political, but I'm just saying, certainly when you look at the conspiracy theorists, this is quite apt, right? With a little bit of information, just having this absurd amount of confidence, it's not a good thing. It's certainly not a good thing. But if you're a wise person, then it is sustenance. It what keeps you going. So be rational in that. Definitely be rational in that. But, just because things are hard doesn't mean that you should necessarily give up on them. They're hard for a reason. It's always going to be hard for a reason. And I think it's a good thing. Perhaps looking at the other end of the scale, we give up way too easily just because things aren't hard. And I'm actually going to talk about this in a second. But the fourth reason we don't action our goals is because we set the bar too high. We do too much, and this is when you have to be quite nuanced. Don't go overboard with what you want to accomplish or what you want to achieve. Um, that's just, it's like the turtle and the hare. Don't ask for too much. Don't be too much. Don't do too much. Don't be too overconfident. Have that level of nuance where you have balance with your goals and your ambitions. Take one step at a time. When you set the bar too high, you end up doing nothing. It's sort of being like the jack of all trades, but the master of none. And I personally think in many respects, you can do both. You can be a master of multiple things, but don't simply set the bar too high and fail straight away. Do things slowly and slowly with purpose. The fifth reason, I think it's another thing that we tend to do, is that we don't prioritize our goals. I mean, take a second right here. When you get home, what's the first thing that you want to do? It can be anything. I mean, there's no wrong answer. What's the first thing that you want to do? Maybe you want to get a snack, coming from work, coming from school. Maybe you want to get a snack. Maybe you want to watch TV. Maybe you want to jump on the computer. So many things you want to do. Maybe you want to play with your dog. Now, what if you had the goal of being an artist? What if you had a goal of being an artist? Where does that come in to your after school or after work activities? Where does that come in? I think many times we have goals, we have things that we want to do, but we just don't prioritize them. We don't put it first. And putting it first, that also requires nuance. But for a second here, why is it that you're not putting your goals at the top of your list? If you're not, maybe it's not something that you really, really want to do. That's definitely real talk, isn't it? Maybe it's not something that you truly want to do. Maybe you just want the perks of the goal, but you don't necessarily want the sacrifice of the hard work that is required to receive those perks. And look, many times people actually have that, and I don't really know what to say about that, because I've certainly had that. I've certainly had goals where I simply wanted the perks, but I didn't necessarily want to sacrifice. I didn't necessarily want to put in the hard work. I simply just wanted the benefits. I mean, I don't know, maybe it's fame. Maybe we want that celebrity nature. We want the paparazzi, and we want the people taking our photos and wanting our autographs. Maybe we want all that. But perhaps if you want to be an actor and get all those perks, perhaps you don't want to actually go to acting class. Maybe you don't want to perform. Maybe you don't want to recite scripts. Maybe you don't go to class. I mean, maybe even if you enroll in class. I mean, I think law school is quite apt in this situation. If you want to be a lawyer, you have to go through law school. You have to go to class. You have to go to your workshops and tutorials. You have to work hard. You have to study hard. You have to participate. You have to get work experience. You have to do so much. And that's required. Like, you have to do it. You have to prioritize if you want your goals. But, and this is where nuance comes in. Don't go overboard. Don't go overboard. I mean, this is something that I definitely sort of feel on a personal level. Ambitious people who have ambition to do things, to conquer the world, to do so much. I see ambitious people as being one of two things. One, you can be ambitious in terms of a verb, i.e. a doing word, right? You're ambitious for this task. And I think that's a good thing. Or you can be ambitious using ambitious as an adjective to describe someone. I think that's a bad thing. When you're ambitious as a verb, it means that you are dedicated to the task. You're sacrificing, you're doing everything that you can to achieve your goal. That's great. But when you're an ambitious person as an adjective, well, that just means you want. When is enough enough? When is enough enough? That's the issue. When is enough enough? When will you finally be happy with your goal? Because I've seen so many people, and you might see this a lot with entrepreneurs and quote unquote successful people who have done great things, but they're not happy, they're not content. And if any normal person, for example, looks at their life, they're probably thinking, wow, this guy is really great. This girl is really great. They must be so happy and proud. You know, if I were them, I would probably be relaxing at the Bahamas, sipping a cocktail, sunbathing, right? I'll just be relaxing. Or maybe I'll be doing some volunteering, helping people out, you know, bringing me this, not just, you know, bringing me this intrinsic joy and happiness, whilst also being able to provide an extrinsic benefit for so many people. You know, maybe you have that. But I've noticed ambitious people, they just, you know, they're not happy, they're not content. And that, to me, is very counterintuitive. If you have a particular goal, for example, if you want to be happy and find peace in your life, you need to be able to establish when enough is enough. And certainly when it comes to prioritizing, these are the same people who, ironically, aren't necessarily sacrificing themselves. They're sacrificing others. They're sacrificing their families who have to deal with their agony and distraught. They're sacrificing other people so they can benefit in whatever aspiration that they have. So prioritize, but don't prioritize where you're sacrificing other people. Don't do that. You know, make your goal a goal, but don't throw other people on the bus to achieve your goal. And you might be asking, Raph, what type of example are you talking about? Well, I'm talking about basic things. I'm talking about, typical example, you know, if you have children, you might be an adult, you might be a father, a husband, or a wife or mother, and you might have a particular goal in mind, right? Which is great. That's cool. You have your own life. But your goal all of a sudden becomes a priority over your children's needs. This is, you know, I definitely don't need to go there, because surely you understand the end result of that. So make sure you prioritize your goals in a fashion that is healthy, that is sensible, that is reasonable, that you are putting, you're definitely prioritizing, but you're also having that level of nuance and appreciation. But say you've done that. Say you're a rational person, and you definitely would be a rational person if you clicked on this podcast, because it is A Pragmatic Life. It probably resonates with you. So how do you actually overcome that? You know, I've been going on and on. Let's actually look at how you can overcome that. First off, mitigation. Have a to-do list that is realistic. Me saying that I'm going to run a marathon after work is not realistic. That doesn't make any sense at all. Right? It might be a great goal. It might be a perfect way for me to increase my long distance running ability, but it's definitely not realistic. Go slow. That's the key. Go slow. That is definitely the key. You know, for example, let's say your goal is to get a six-pack. Maybe your goal is to get huge biceps. Maybe you want to be really fit and healthy and look great. Maybe that is your goal. But you're really struggling to go to the gym. Because the idea of having a 2-hour workout at the gym, just pumping iron and running on the treadmill, it's just too much for you. Maybe it's just too much. It's overbearing, and it frightens you. And it frightened most people, quite frankly, even me. You know, when I stopped going to the gym, the idea of having even an hour gym session was just too much. It didn't make any sense to me. I was just petrified about it. Well, guess what? Take it slow. How about, instead of jumping right into a 2-hour gym session, that you ride your bike to the gym and then go home? Why don't you just do that, right? Maybe just walk to the gym and just go home. Maybe even just drive to the gym and then go home. You're probably thinking, well, that's really stupid, right? You didn't even go inside the gym. But that's the whole point. You don't have to go straight into a 2-hour gym session. You didn't even have to go right into the gym, but you made the effort of getting out of your couch and going to the actual gym premises. You've actually made effort there. Don't think that just because it perhaps is meaningless to another person, that it doesn't mean anything. Because guess what? It does mean something. Because you took the initiative to get out of your couch, to jump out of your couch and go to the gym. Because you technically went to the gym, right? You went to the front door and then you went home again. But guess what? That's a great thing. Because you know what? Now it doesn't seem like a big deal to you. Because you might do that the next day. The next day, you might actually go to the gym and you might go inside the gym. You know, maybe you go there for 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Maybe you go on a treadmill for, a 5-minute walk. Maybe you might go on a spin bike for 5 or 10 minutes. And then you go home again. That's brilliant. That is brilliant. Again, just because other people might look at you differently or other people might say something negative about it, who cares? It's your life. It's not their life. And I think that's an absolutely brilliant thing because you slowly can start to achieve your goals. And it's these small little steps that make such a big difference. I cannot express that enough. It's these small little things that truly allow you to achieve a goal. So go slow. And that's when you can prioritize. Because guess what? When you have realistic goals on your to-do list, it's not a big deal anymore. It really isn't a big deal anymore. And you actually do it. And that's when you can do it constantly on a consistent basis. Don't be reckless. That's the other thing. Because when you take too much on, and, a lot of these things I've noticed, they definitely overlap. So hopefully they're not, jumping too much across the board, but definitely don't be reckless with your prioritization. Be realistic with your to-do list. Don't, as I said before, don't say you're going to run a marathon after work when that is just completely reckless. It's not reasonable whatsoever on any board at all. There's no point in writing that because I think you'll be even more disappointed when you don't get to do it, even though you were never going to be able to do it. So have these realistic type of goals and certainly be honest with yourself. Sometimes the goals that we have, they are too difficult. As I said, sometimes they might be too hard, or sometimes they just simply can't be prioritized. But that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? Certainly when it comes to goal setting or looking at your goals, and perhaps I can discuss the idea of a goal and the concept of a goal in a later episode. But what is it about that goal that brings you happiness, that brings you this level of content? What is it exactly about that goal? It's about being honest with yourself. And I think certainly when you're honest with yourself, you realize the goals that are reasonable, and you can actually prioritize them in a way that is reasonable for all, that isn't negligent. It doesn't require you to go overboard, but it does allow you to, achieve your actual goals. Now, the second to last reason as to why we may not action our goals is that we're just not consistent. I talked about this before. Quality is important, but so is consistency. And just because you did it once does not mean that you'll get results. Just because you go to the gym for 45 minutes on a Wednesday afternoon does not mean you are going to get a six-pack the next morning. It definitely doesn't work that way. You're going to have to go to the gym constantly, consistently, on a every second day or weekly, and you're going to have to do that for a very long period. You're going to have to eat right for a very long period, and then at the very end, you'll actually see results. And it's a good thing, right? It definitely feels really good when you finally achieved that goal over a long period, but it's, nothing that is easy or nothing that's important. Nothing that's meaningful comes easily. And consistency is a huge part of that. Excuse me. I I think a solution to this, it's not really a solution, but I think something that definitely does give you a lot more confidence is research. Look at biographies of people who have accomplished the things that you want to accomplish. I've certainly seen a lot. If you like YouTube, for example, I was watching this video by MKBHD. He's a tech reviewer on YouTube, and he was answering some fan questions or something about, how can I make it big on YouTube? And he emphasized that consistency was undoubtedly the most important thing for him. And then you go to his channel and you go to his videos and you click earliest to latest, and you look at his earliest videos and you realize, one, they were ages ago. They were, they weren't videos that he made yesterday. They weren't videos that he made last week. They were videos that he made a decade ago. And then you realize how many videos it took for him to even gain a handful of subscribers. It took a lot. I think he said 100 videos or so. 100 videos before he even got a handful of subscribers. And yeah, he's successful now. But guess what? He's successful because of that level of consistency over those years and years and years. And that's the biggest thing, consistency in whatever goal you want to achieve. Business. Wow. So what's the statistics of the amount of small businesses that fail within the first year, or the first 2 years, or the first 3 years? It is substantial. I can't remember exactly the percentage, but it's substantial. And look, there are multiple reasons why a business will fail, right? And let's not be too naive about that. A lot of things are out of our control. We need to accept that. It's not necessarily that we like that, but look, some things are out of our control. But you know what? A big part of that is inconsistency. Big part of that is inconsistency. If you want to be a painter, you're not going to draw one little thing and then end up being this famous artist, being the next Picasso. It doesn't work like that. If you want to do this, if you want to be a singer, that's the same thing. I actually had I took this unit at university where it was a singing unit, a singing course. And singing is something that a lot of people think is it's either you have it or you don't. And to a large degree that is true. But do you know that you can train your vocal cords? Probably don't know that. You probably think that's completely ridiculous. How can you actually train your vocal cords? I thought you either have it or you don't. Well, guess what? Even singing requires effort. It requires training. And I remember going through that and my voice was so sore. It was ridiculously sore. And the teacher was like, that's the whole point. It's going to be sore. You're training your vocal cords to reach these high notes or these low notes. You're training yourself to sing. And it is possible. You're not necessarily going to be Adele. You're not necessarily going to be Michael Jackson, but you are going to be able to improve over time with consistency, with dedication. And when you do your research and you look at all these people and you look at these biographies, you realize, well, guess what? They've actually taken a long time to reach their goals and potentials. And I think that gives you a lot of confidence because now you know that you can do the same thing. But we got to be honest with ourselves. What works for others doesn't necessarily work for ourselves. Again, it's about finding your place in the world. You're finding what works for you, and definitely what works for you in the right way. But that nevertheless does not preclude the fact that you have to be consistent in whatever task that you want to do. Whatever goal that you have to be consistent. And that is perhaps the difficult part of everything. Because you can say something is hard, but you can give a crack at it and end up producing whatever that is. You might say you want to end up getting a six-pack and you go to the gym that one day. That's great, right? But staying consistent is the hardest thing. And I think ultimately the only way to stay consistent is doing something that you truly, truly love and you truly, truly have a passion for. And it's certainly very difficult to do that. It really is very difficult to do that. But you can do that. You certainly can. And finally, the last reason, it's perhaps a sad reason, because you give up. And my take on the idea of giving up, it's perhaps not going to be the typical motivational speech that people give. Don't give up, keep going and keep going. Well, guess what? This is a pragmatic life. Sometimes you need to give up. Giving up is not a bad thing. It really, really isn't a bad thing. In fact, there is this cathartic feeling about letting go. It's like ending a relationship where you are really sad and really distraught about the end, and then over time you find peace. Over time you realize that relationship just wasn't the right thing to do. It wasn't the right thing to be in, and even though it was tough, even though there was a lot of heartbreak and a lot of emotional toll, you end up finding peace with yourself. It's very cathartic. And I think in many respects, sometimes things aren't meant to be. The goal that you might have, they're just not meant to be. And people sometimes really need to accept the fact that giving up, it's not a bad thing. It's like being free. It really is like being free. Because sometimes the goal that you might have, it might not be what you've actually imagined it to be. Right? You might like it and you might have really, really loved it at the beginning, but maybe it wasn't what you expected. And guess what? It's perfectly fine to feel that way. Like, one thing I've certainly noticed about a lot of things is that we tend to gravitate and take on the opinions of others. So if someone says they really, really like something, or perhaps a group says they really, really like something, you're pushed to like it as well. And that's certainly not a good thing when it comes to your own goals and your own thoughts in life. Because sometimes it's not meant to be for you. Because ask yourself, if everyone else hated, I don't know, maybe everyone hated the idea of painting. Or your friends, they don't like painting. They don't really care for it. How would you feel? Like, would your thoughts on painting change compared to having a group of friends who love the idea of painting and creativity and arts? Would it change? Because I think in many ways it would. Because it almost allows you to finally find your place in opinion. Because you're not going to say an unpopular opinion out loud. In many ways, it might prevent you from accepting the truth and your true viewpoints on it. So, I think giving up it's not a bad thing at all. But, there's always a but. Don't give up too easily. Just because it's hard doesn't mean you should give up on it. And, the reason why I say but is because there's always an exception to every little thing in life. Because you've probably heard of these stories about someone being at the edge of greatness and reading back on their biography. They might have had only sense to their name. They didn't have anything at all, but they kept going and they finally reached that hurdle and they reached that goal and they finally succeeded. Well, that's great. That's great because sometimes that does happen. It sometimes does happen. Sometimes it doesn't. Again, be rational with that. But look, it's a personal thing. The idea of giving up on your goals, it always needs to be a personal thing. Never let someone else influence that thought, that decision. Because one, you're never going to find true peace. When I was talking about that cathartic feeling, it doesn't work if that decision was because of someone else. It's never worked that way at all. When it's your own decision, that's when you can finally find peace. That's when you can finally accept yourself. And that's when you can finally be confident in your decision. So, that's sort of a sad note in many respects. The 7 things that stops us from actioning our dreams. But I think it's important to recognize, giving up isn't a bad thing. It isn't a bad thing. And again, this isn't something that a motivational podcast would say, because I truly believe in people telling the honest truth. People simply being honest. Because when you're honest, it allows people to find their own true path, whatever that may be. Because you might be thinking, you might be hearing this and thinking, maybe this is something that I need to give up on. Or Maybe it's something that I want to pursue, that I truly believe I can pursue, and I might know that it's difficult and it's hard, and I have to be consistent, but it's worth it. It brings me happiness. And it's the thing that I think about at work. It's what I think about at university. It's what I truly want to do. Well, if that's the case, then that's perfect. That really is perfect. So I hope, this podcast has been going on for a while. I hope that it's been useful. I hope that it's given some food for thought, and maybe it might awaken something in you. You know, that goal that you've had in the back of your mind that you've been thinking about all this time, maybe it might actually be useful, right? You know, and who knows? Let me know if this is, if you're going to pursue your goals. Tell me what your goals are. Sometimes it's easier, especially in this type of setting, to just tell a random person what your goals are, what your ambitions are. And I find it's often much easier to talk to a stranger than someone that you know. So anyway, I hope that has been beneficial to you. If you want to contact me, you can contact me at Raphael Parvin on any platform, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. I'll have my website up running very soon, raphaelparvin.com. So contact me there or in the description box. Also, just a few plugs. As I said before on my YouTube channel, I talk a lot about financial literacy and personal finance. If you're very interested in that, if you're very interested in business and entrepreneurship, even though I really hate that word, entrepreneurship, feel free to watch me there. Feel free to contact me there, or feel free to contact me regardless. Also, the other podcast I have is Mystery Lanes, and you know, one of the things that I absolutely love is horror stories and scary stories, which is, again, it's very weird. Again, you never tell people what your goals are or what your interests are, but I really love scary stories, especially real life stories. Again, having done, you know, criminal law, I find these really fascinating, these mysteries. And, you know, I have a podcast where I talk a lot about these and I recite a lot of these scary stories and whatnot. And the first episode is going to be out very, very shortly. So check me out there, Mystery Lane. You'll find all the details on my bio. But anyway, thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for watching. As I said, you can watch this podcast live on YouTube, or you can listen to it on any of your preferred podcast platforms. But anyway, thank you so much. I hope you have a good day. I hope you have a good week, and I hope to talk to you soon. Bye.